What's going on, Wolfpack? It's Wolfgal here with Twinkie. So, we have a bit of a different video for you. We just hit 1,000 views on the channel overall.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
all of you. Thank you a lot. So, for your support, for your help, for everything that you have done for us over the past month or so now.
Probably.
We're going to sit here and do a special video for you.
And yes, we're technically copying from our king, MrBeast, but we just thought this would be a funny idea.
Yeah. So, as you can tell, the message on the screen says you've hit the space bar 0 times.
This is how we're going to keep track, because if you guys read the title, we are going to be saying MrBeast 1,000 times for 1,000 video views.
Now, the way we're going to do this is we're going to split it up 500 each. Since we share the channel together, we're going to split the responsibility of this together.
Yes.
So, I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and get this started.
Yep. MrBeast.
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 MrBeast. MrBeast. Okay.
MrBeast.
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 MrBeast. Oh, we're not even at 100 yet. We're tired.
Let's just stop at 100.
MrBeast. MrBeast. MrBeast.
MrBeast.
MrBeast. MrBeast. MrBeast. MrBeast.
Hey, relax. We'll say, so I'll say it and then you say it.
Okay.
MrBeast.
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 Okay, that's 100.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. This
We're gonna need water or something.
that was already terrible, guys.
Wow. And
How does MrBeast do 100,000 of these? Oh,
I don't know.
I said his name.
I don't know how MrBeast does 100,000 of these.
Oh my goodness.
We could sit here and have a normal conversation, sit here and just say MrBeast.
No, okay, you know what, I'm sorry, this is gonna kill us, but I say we do just us saying MrBeast, instead of having conversations.
But MrBeast is amazing.
Yeah, you're right.
MrBeast.
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 MrBeast. Relax. 1, 2, 3.
MrBeast.
MrBeast. Hey. I say, then you say. MrBeast.
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 I love MrBeast.
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 MrBeast. MrBeast.
Oh, this is gonna take forever saying MrBeast.
MrBeast.
My jaw is locking up from saying MrBeast.
We've only done it 100 times.
135 times. Actually, 136. Because I said it during the sentence. I said MrBeast.
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 MrBeast 150.
Yay! Okay.
MrBeast.
Okay. MrBeast.
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 Once we hit 200 times of saying MrBeast, we gotta take another break.
Okay. MrBeast.
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 Hold on. MrBeast.
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 What is this, a race? This is why we can't have nice things. MrBeast.
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 MrBeast. I love Mr. Beast's videos where he's sitting here giving away stuff.
MrBeast.
Mr. Beast.
MrBeast.
Mr. Beast.
MrBeast.
Mr. Beast.
MrBeast.
All right. Oh,
Really? This is the way
I know.
there. Saying mysteries.
You think we should stop at 100? No, we can't do that to the viewers. We cannot do that to the viewers. The viewers love Mr. Beast. We cannot sit here and stop saying Mr. Beast at 500. We have to keep saying Mr. Beast until we get to 1,000 of Mr. Beasts.
MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. That was 5. Or 10, sorry.
Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Jeez.
Relax.
Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Okay.
MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. I love MrBeast. I love MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. MrBeast, 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 Beast.
Beast.
Joe, why is this so fun?
I don't know.
MrBeast, 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 and MrBeast.
Maybe because we like Mr. Beast as our dad, we consider Mr. Beast as our dad.
MrBeast is the king of YouTube.
Mr. Beast is the greatest person on earth.
Mr.
Mr. Beast is the most generous person on earth, honestly.
MrBeast, 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 MrBeast,
Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Now I see why he fails a lot.
Yeah.
Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Considering I said like 30, you want to do 30 now?
No
300
no
times.
wonder he fails so much, and no wonder. You don't realize how hard it is to say a word over and over and over again.
Even though we're saying the best word,
Mr. Beast over and over again. Just like Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast.
Did you forget what word you were saying?
Yes. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast.
Okay.
This is, wow, so difficult.
Mr. Beast, I have to give you props, man. Oh. Yeah, we knew exactly what to do. I mean, you counted 100,000. You said PewDiePie 100,000 times. You said Logan Paul 100,000 times. I mean, Mr. Beast, you're just a legend. You got some water? Because I need to say Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. I need some.
It tastes more like sugar than anything, but I guess that's what happens when you say
That's so sweet.
I guess that's what happens when you take McDonald's liquid sugar and pour it in tea.
Mr. Beast, 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 Mrs. Mr. Beast, 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 you have to run. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast. I hope you're happy with your girlfriend, Mr. Beast.
Like, seriously.
Yeah. We're not trying to be mean. We're just saying we hope you're having a good relationship.
We're being legitimately honest. We hope you're happy with her. We hope you're enjoying every moment that you get with her.
And make sure to give her extra cuddles during quarantine.
Okay, guys. The reason why I said liquid sugar from McDonald's, I work for McDonald's. All right, that's my daytime job when I'm not sitting here.
Mr. Beast should work for McDonald's.
When I'm not sitting here doing YouTube channel like MrBeast. So, yes.
Joinany.com/MrBeast. Shop MrBeast.
MrBeast. YouTube.com/MrBeast. Is that the link to his channel?
Twitch.com/MrBeast6000.
I think so. MrBeast's Instagram, you need to go follow it. MrBeast. Doesn't he have Facebook?
Oh, MrBeast TikTok.
Yes, definitely MrBeast TikTok. MrBeast Twitter. Are we missing anything?
I don't think so.
ShopMrBeast.com is the most amazing website. You can get any MrBeast merch on there, and they're all the same price. We noticed that earlier today. We may show you here at the end of the video, but MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. Jeez,
I'll take it from here. MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. MrBeast, MrBeast, MrBeast. You guys gotta try this. It's actually really difficult. MrBeast, 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 Beast, MrBeast, 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 Mr. Beast. I cannot do this. MrBeast, 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 and did I forget to say MrBeast? We are halfway.
This is so difficult. I was not expecting this at all. Like, I knew it was going to be pretty difficult, but jeez Louise, saying MrBeast so many times back to back, just saying MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. It's a tongue twister if you keep saying MrBeast over and over again.
Hey, at least it's better than saying Morgs. I'm just kidding. That should be on my list. Yes, thank you. Did I say the wrong name?
You did.
MrBeast, 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 Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast,
Mrs. Beast, Mrs. Beast. I believe Mr. Beast is what you meant to say, not Mrs. Beast. It's supposed to be Mr. Beast, not Mrs. Mr. Beast, not Mrs. Beast, Mr.
Wait, would Maddie be Mrs. Beast because Jimmy is Mr. Beast?
Yes.
Okay.
Or at least I assume that's how it works since he is Mr. Beast. By the way, did we mention that if you want to install Honey, you need to go to joinhoney.com/MrBeast?
Why did you do it twice, Mr. Beast?
Because you said it.
Oh, because of Mr. Beast?
Yes. Also, if you want any Mr. Beast merch, go ahead and go to shopmrbeast.com. Yep.
And we said that both.
So, his YouTube channel, MrBeast, is amazing. I recommend checking it out if you haven't already.
His TikTok is MrBeast. His Twitter is MrBeast. And I think his Instagram's also MrBeast.
And I believe didn't we say his Twitch was MrBeast
6000?
6000?
Yeah. MrBeast 6000, yeah.
MrBeast? Mr. Beast, are you here?
Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. I have an announcement, but I'll let Wolf say the 600 Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast.
Okay, 600. We're only 60% of the way.
Mr. Beast is amazing. Mr. Beast is God. Mr. Beast is Jesus. Mr. Beast can walk on water.
Probably.
He can also be the best YouTuber there is. Mr. Beast is a lot better than Morgs.
That's just a true fact right there.
Yeah. By the way, Unlucky Fox.
Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast.
Am I wrong? Did Unlucky Fox say that we were better than Morgs, or was it somebody
I think it was
else?
Meow.
Well, whoever said a channel with 21 subscribers creates better content than Morgs, that just makes us feel so much better.
Mr. Beast is better than Morgs. Mr. Beast is better than Morgs. Mr. Beast is better than Morgs. Mr. Beast is better than Morgs.
Mr. Beast is the original creator of all Morgs
Yes.
content. Like, Mr. Beast is just God when it comes to content. Mr. Beast is also God when it comes to giving back to the community.
Mr. Beast gave like a bunch of food to food banks, considering people are hoarding it because of COVID-19.
Didn't Mr. Beast sit here and donate like 1 million meals to homeless people?
Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast gave away like $1 million worth of food.
Wow, Mr. Beast is just so
Mr. Beast
loving.
is a beast.
Yes, Mr. Beast is just so caring for the community. Mr. Beast loves everybody.
Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. And for 2,000 views, we'll do 2,000.
We're not guaranteeing that
Why?
yet.
It's so fun, though.
We're not guaranteeing that yet.
Okay,
But
we
we
can do
will
some.
say here,
Mr.
say-
Beast, Mr. 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 Beast.
I do believe you meant to say Mr. Beast.
I am saying Mr. Beast. What do
It
you?
sounds like you're saying
Mr.
Mrs. Beast.
Um.
Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast.
Okay.
Mr. Beast. 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 Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast.
Have you heard of Mr. Beast?
Yes, I do believe I've heard of Mr. Beast. I
On what
also
platform?
believe. I've watched him on Mr. Beast.
I remember Mr. Beast's cringy intro series.
Right? I also love watching Mr. Beast donate all that money to like Twitch streamers that are starting. It was so.
What's your favorite video of Mr. Beast's?
Probably his marathon one. Probably Mr. Beast doing the marathon.
Mine was when Mr. Beast bought everything in the store.
Yeah, I loved watching Mr. Beast buy everything in the store and then turn around and give it to the community. Mr. Beast is just wonderful when it comes to everybody. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast.
700!
Wow.
I'm gonna try to say it 100 times back to back. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. It's a mouthful. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast,
Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr.
Oh yeah,
Beast.
did we mention Mr. Beast?
No, I don't think we mentioned Mr. Beast. Have you heard
Maybe
of
we-
Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast?
Messenger Beast?
No, I said Mr. Beast?
Oh,
No,
okay.
Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast. Who's that famous YouTuber who everybody's more than likely heard of? Isn't it, I believe Mr. Beast, right?
I thought his name was Mr. Beast. Actually, that's what you just said. Mr. Beast is Mr. Beast, right? I don't know
I do
if
believe Mr. Beast is Mr. Beast, but I don't know if Mr. Beast knows Mr. Beast. Maybe Mr. Beast is Mr. Beast, but doesn't know Mr. Beast, and sits here and acts like Mr. Beast?
Chris?
MrBeast is just amazing.
MrBeast, 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 MrBeast.
MrBeast.
MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. MrBeast, 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 MrBeast.
MrBeast. MrBeast. I believe MrBeast. MrBeast. MrBeast.
I would love to see this in time lapse.
MrBeast. Did I mention that MrBeast doesn't know MrBeast, but he does know MrBeast at the same time that he doesn't know MrBeast?
How does MrBeast not know MrBeast, but at the same time know MrBeast?
I don't know how MrBeast knows MrBeast, but at the same time doesn't know MrBeast, but at the same time acts like MrBeast, talks like MrBeast, walks like MrBeast, and produces the same content as MrBeast.
How does MrBeast walk?
I believe MrBeast walks like MrBeast.
I would have never thought of that. MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. Why does it sound like I'm saying MrBeast just very wrong? MrBeast, 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 are you okay over here, boy?
So, when Mr. Beast and Mrs. Beast sit here and walk around, does Mrs. Beast ride on Mr. Beast's back because Mr. Beast is a tiger? Or does Mrs. Beast walk next to Mr. Beast while Mr. Beast is sitting here running?
No, because in one of Mr. Beast's Instagram photos, she was holding like a huge, I think it was like a Pasheen cat or something. I'm gonna have to look it up after this video, but MrBeast, 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 MrBeast.
MrBeast, 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 MrBeast. By the way, do we mention that you should subscribe to MrBeast? Or follow MrBeast?
Yes.
Or like MrBeast? Or love MrBeast? Because MrBeast is God to everybody on the entire universe, or the entire Earth, known as MrBeast's Earth.
MrBeast, 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 MrBeast.
I need more MrBeasts. Heavenly
MrBeast, 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 MrBeast,
MrBeast, MrBeast. MrBeast, 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 MrBeast,
MrBeast.
MrBeast, 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 MrBeast.
Okay, stop. Now we gotta say this at the same time, okay? 3, 2, 1. MrBeast! Oh, that looks so cool! And because you have 1,003 views, MrBeast?
MrBeast. And, MrBeast.
We do love you, MrBeast, and we really wanna just... We made this video for you, honestly.
Yeah, MrBeast, you're just absolutely amazing.
And yes, every time we say MrBeast, we're still going to count.
Yes, even though we have finished the entire thing, every time we say MrBeast, we are sitting here hitting the space bar because MrBeast, you're just amazing. We love what you've done for the community. We love what you have done for the Earth. Team Trees was an amazing project.
If we had the money, we would have donated, but
I wasn't working at the time, and I wasn't able to get to the
MrBeast.
But if you do, the next thing you do, MrBeast, we are going to stay here and do everything in our power to help you out as much as possible because
we just shouted you out.
Yeah, we
shouted you out, MrBeast, and you were just like the most amazing person known to me.
Yeah, we love you, Mr. Beast. We appreciate everything you've done for the earth.
Yeah, Mr. Beast.
And anything that you do from this day forth, whether we can only donate $1 or
Heck, if we get popular and we donate $10,000 to you, Mr. Beast.
we are
No,
going to
just
sit
be
here and we're going to help you out as much as possible. But
I'm surprised we're not tired of saying Mr. Beast already.
I know, I love saying Mr. Beast. I also like saying Mr. Beast and Mr. Beast.
Don't
and
subscribe
Mr.
to
Beast.
Morg, subscribe to Mr. Beast.
Yes, subscribe to Mr. Beast. Subscribe to Mr. Beast. Subscribe to Mr. Beast and subscribe to Mr. Beast. Alright, guys. I do believe we have said it enough. So, honestly, I say we call it here.
But I love Mr. Beast to end the video. Actually, you know what? I'm pretty sure Mr. Beast would love to see this video.
I'm pretty sure Mr. Beast would love to see this video as well. I'm also sure Mrs. Beast would like to sit down with Mr. Beast and see this video.
We love you, Mr. Beast, just to make it even.
Yeah. But, guys, this is where we're going to call it quits.
This is Wolfcow and Twinkie GG signing out. See you later, Wolfpack.
See